everybody, it's Beth. Welcome to Infinite Garden. Today I'm going to be reviewing Natasha Denona's Retro Glam palette. Yes, it's the end of December. Yes, this palette has been on the market for about 2 months. I know I'm late to the party, but I've had a ton of time with this. I've been wearing it a lot over the last 6 weeks or so, and I've got complete thoughts to share with you. I wasn't sure at first if I would purchase this palette, but I ended up using my 20% off VIB discount during the Sephora pre-holiday sale, and I'm glad that I did. I'll just give you that headline first. This palette works well for me, but I don't necessarily think that it will work well for everybody. I think this is a great palette if you don't mind wearing a little bit of color, if you're comfortable wearing green eyeshadow, which isn't really true for everybody, and if you don't mind a little bit of a cool, kind of dusty gray toned eye look. I don't think it's for everybody, but for some of us, it is just what we're looking for. You can get interesting eye looks from it. During the last couple of weeks, I was visiting family and we were watching a ton of kind of comfort TV. I noticed eye looks in some of the shows that we were watching that seemed to be in line with what Retro Glam offers. Specifically, we binge watched all of season 7 of Mad Men. I had watched the first 6 seasons and then never got to the final season. So over the last week, we literally watched the entire season over just a few days. And I couldn't help but notice that Don Draper's second wife, Megan, uses a lot of pastel colors. In her case, she was using a lot of pale blues, which were beautiful on her, but I think you can achieve a lot of these same looks with these light green shades. We also watched The Devil Wears Prada, and I noticed that Miranda Priestley very frequently was wearing cool-toned, dusty, shimmery, light eyeshadow, which I think you can get a lot of these same looks with this palette too. Let's take a look at the palette. We'll do swatches one by one here. I will be showing some comparisons to other palettes later. Flare, a sparkling metallic vintage rose with a silver shift. Jazzy, a metallic dark cool brown. For me, this is an excellent one and done shade. Oscar, metallic light medium vintage champagne. Evergreen, a matte cream powder medium dark sage green. I find this to be an extremely potent color, and at times I have wondered if it may lead to some staining on my eyelid. Marlin, metallic light medium sage green. Maxi, a metallic medium dark warm taupe. This is a super useful and wearable shade to me, great for one and done. Sage, a matte medium sage green. Holly, matte light neutral rose. I find this color very wearable. Fringe, a matte pastel sage green. Faye, a matte medium muted clay. On me, this color pulls surprisingly green. Flutter, a sparkling light champagne pink. This is a lovely topper. Lucy, a matte light limestone. On me, this is very close to my skin tone. Palladian, a metallic pastel sage green. Belle, a matte medium dusty rose. On me, I find this color to be quite potent. Finally, Oz, a metallic medium dark muted forest green. This is a beautiful color, and if you wear greens well, it can be a lovely, unusual one and done shade. Top row. The second row. I find this palette to be, for me, pretty easy to wear. And I don't mean very easy to wear, I mean pretty easy to wear. I tend to be neutral. I have a slight olive undertone. I consider myself in the light medium, light in the winter sometimes, light medium in the summer, sort of skin tone category. So I can wear greens very comfortably. As I wore this palette over the last 6 weeks, what I came to understand is that what we really have here are several palettes in one. You know, you can pop these individual pans out of the component and rearrange them. I want to show you some footage of what I did with that when I rearranged these along the lines of their neutral pink and green tones. What I found is that for me, the neutral shades here are some of the best neutral shades in my collection for my skin tone. The medium tan Faye leans greenish on me, which is kind of interesting. It's easy for me to pull together a very flattering neutral eye look that makes this highly wearable on a day-to-day basis. The pink tones are somewhat vibrant for me, but flattering all the same. I did find that the pink tones look great when I'm also wearing a pinky blush and pinky lips for a very chic monochrome look across my entire makeup look. I really like how that looks. I did find when I tried to mix the shimmering pinkish red flare with some of the taupe deepening colors, that did produce a look that I didn't ultimately like. This particular image of myself was just a total makeup fail day. I used the wrong primer for my foundation, and then I didn't like my eye look at all. So I immediately washed my face after I took this picture. So I think that's important to see. For this eye look, I started with Holly all over the lid, and then I deepened with Belle. And then I added a little bit of flare at the center of the lid, and then used Oscar and Flutter. The green tones are lovely. I made a number of looks that I liked. I'm wearing one right now. I think that if you follow makeup and you see somebody wearing these tones, I do think it's immediately identifiable that they came from this particular palette right now. Maybe I think I know what I'm looking at, but I do think that these are really unusual to the market tones. Maybe we'll see more of them in the year coming up. In this palette, I do think these greens are the most polarizing in terms of if it's wearable or not. The look I'm wearing right now, I would not wear to the office. I wore it for filming because I wanted to put on evergreen, which to me I think is one of the most challenging colors in this particular palette. It's a cream to powder formula. I even at one point wondered if maybe it was staining my eyes. I have a little mirror in my shower, and I was washing my face in the shower, and I could see deep shadows exactly where evergreen had been the previous time I wore it, and I wondered if it hadn't stained. And I always use a primer, and I use really good eye makeup remover, so I've been kind of afraid to get back into evergreen. We'll see if it does this to me again. I also feel like when I'm wearing it, it's overtly colorful makeup, and that's not always my comfort zone. It doesn't mean it's not pretty. It doesn't mean it's not flattering. It just means it makes me feel a little self-conscious and a little bit obvious. I did wear this palette on Christmas Day, and you know, I thought when I was sitting down to do my makeup, I thought, well, this would be the day to use the pink and the green together. I saw a lot of YouTube tutorials where people did mix the two colors, and I honestly didn't really want that for myself. I wanted to wear this palette because I wanted that kind of frosty, wintry, cool toned look, and I love the shimmers here. But in this case, I opted primarily for the neutral tones with just a little bit of green. I think I used Marlin at the center, which is a fabulous green shimmer. I have really enjoyed wearing this palette, and I have enjoyed reaching for it. There are certain kind of looks that I really like to wear that I cannot get with this palette. Specifically, one of the looks that I like to make a lot from the Moonlit Seduction palette from Pat McGrath, I like to use some of these darker, deep matte shades. There isn't something like this in this Natasha Denona shade. It also doesn't have warm neutrals. I'm going to show you, this is the Natasha Denona Biba palette, which has a lot of like terracotta and somewhat orangier tones. None of these are present here as well. So I think that the Retro Glam palette in a lot of ways is a specialty. I don't think it's a crowd pleaser. I do think there's a narrow band of people who are either going to naturally look good in these tones and also want the looks that this palette creates, which is a little bit more of a vintagey, cool, icy look. I think it's a trend, and I think this palette nails the trend. I think the color story here is excellent. The quality is 100% there for Natasha Denona. I think if you're interested in this palette, I think you really need to look at what it is as an object and what its use value is in your life. Natasha Denona puts out a lot of these midi palettes that have these 15 shades. She puts out several a year. It seems to be like her brand is really hitting their stride in terms of offering the minis and the midis together. So you get like the retro mini and then the retro glam in this case, or whatever. You get the mini Zendo and then the Zendo. It seems like she's kind of hit her stride there with these. So I think we'll get more and more of them. And just like I say with the motherships, they might not all be for you. Sometimes a midi might come out that looks like a beautiful object, but you won't actually wear those colors, or the shades aren't right for your skin tone or your specific undertones. I'd like to show how this palette compares to some other Natasha Denona palettes, most notably the Glam palette. I admit that this Glam palette is completely rearranged, so please don't mind their placement. You can see both of these palettes tend to be somewhat desaturated and lighter. By comparison, I wanted to show this next to my Dream palette. You can see when compared to Retro Glam, this is a grayer toned, lighter color story. This is a little bit more, although neutral, it is more saturated and offers much deeper depth. You have this wonderful black shade, deep brown, medium brown, deep purple, deep magenta, deep copper. It fits beautifully with somebody who can handle those deeper tones. If you're still interested in this, but you're on the fence, I also wanted to draw your attention to, of course, the original mini that went along with this. This is the Natasha Denona mini retro palette. I think if you are interested in a little bit of a green look, but you're not sure if you want to have this many green tones, I still think this particular palette is an absolute winner. The medium olive tone is a little more gray than overtly green. This is a beautiful sparkle shade, and you get these pinks as well, so that's a good one to consider. And then I'd also draw your attention to the mini Zendo. I think the mini Zendo is actually very similar in a lot of ways to this palette. I love the mini Zendo palette. It's actually one of my favorite minis. I'm planning to do a video or at least a bunch of shorts on the Natasha Denona minis because I think these are great buys. These are currently running about $29. So if you're kind of curious about this, if this is tickling your fancy a bit, but you don't want to spring for the $69 palette worrying that you won't use all of it, I really think the mini Zendo is as good of a buy as is the mini Glam, which is a little bit cooler and paler. This one is a little bit richer and warmer, and I find this coral color that's here, this little coral shade here, is quite deep and very useful. It's a great shade. Here, I'll just swatch these out real quick for you. Finally, I wanted to compare it to the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette, which I reviewed earlier this year. I really love this color story. My biggest complaint with this palette is how messy it can be. I don't love ABH's formula as much as I love Natasha Denona's formula. I think these color stories are pretty similar. So if you've already picked up this Nouveau palette and you're happy with it, you might really be able to just skip this Retro Glam palette. This one has some of the lovely greens. They're different though. They're a little more olive. I'll compare, this is the shade Hope, which is kind of a mossy green. I'll compare that one to Oz. This is Hope and this is Oz. So they're not that close. You know, Oz is definitely more of a sage color and Hope is more of an olive. And then I'll compare the color Wings to Marlin, which I think is much closer. This is Wings and this is Marlin. I think those two shades are effectively dupes for one another. This is Muse and this is Jazzy, very similar. Metro from ABH and Belle from Retro Glam. So these are very similar too. These aren't perfect dupes for one another, but they're in the same color family and they do a lot of the same things. I think you can get a lot of the same looks. So do I recommend this palette? Well, let me sound like a broken record for a second and just say I recommend this palette if you think that these tones will flatter you and if these are eye looks that you want to get. If you're not really interested in wearing a bunch of green eyeshadow a lot for a long time, then I would skip this palette. I just would. This is quite a lot of product here and it's excellent. It lasts a long time. And if you don't think you're going to use them, maybe your makeup dollars are better spent elsewhere. If these are colors that are interesting to you, I think this is really beautiful and I'm glad it's in my collection. As I showed you, there are lots of alternatives for you to be able to get this look too. So I'm not going to say either way if I think that you should buy it. I am glad I did. I plan to continue wearing this. I think this is going to continue to look really good all the way through spring, and then I can pick it up again in the fall, maybe even in the summer with these pinks. I think it's actually pretty useful for me. If you're interested in seeing how I put this eye look together, I've got that coming up now. Okay, I have all of my other makeup on. All that remains is my eye makeup, so I'm going to start. My plan is to try to create a retro-inspired look. I'm going to start with Lucy, the matte light limestone, and I'm just going to define above my crease. I'm using this Patrick Ta brush I've really come to love. I actually bought a second one because I use it so much. It is made from goat hair. If you're vegan only, it wouldn't work for you, but I find it has good pigment pickup and nice blending. It is very soft. I'm going to pick up some of Fringe, which is this pale sage green. Put that over my lids. I want the green color to be close to my actual iris and not necessarily up by my brow. I'm going to use a small pencil brush and I'm going to go into Evergreen here. This is darker in the pan than it is on the eye. I'm going to blend that out with a little bit of Lucy around the edges just to make sure that it's nice and diffused. I'm not sure these are totally even yet. I'm going to put a little more of this Fringe on my lids underneath Evergreen, just to reassert its presence here, using a flat shader brush. This one's by Fenty, this one is vegan. Okay, now what I want is to bring in a little bit of some of these gray tones. I'm going to go into Maxi, which is described as a metallic, medium, dark, warm taupe. Metallic, medium, dark, warm taupe. Just get a little, catch a little depth. This palette, a lot of people have pointed out that it doesn't offer much depth, and I think that's by design. Blend with that same Patrick Ta blender brush. I'm going to use this synthetic fluffy shader, and I'm going to go into Faye, which is, it's a taupe. It's a matte taupe. They say it's a clay. On me, I feel like it pulls olive green, which is really nice. It's a very useful matte color, but it definitely pulls green, and you might see that here. I'm going to add the smallest bit of Palladian. Palladian is this mint green shimmer here. And then a little bit of Flutter. Okay, I'm going to add some brown eyeliner. Okay, for mascara, I'm going to use this little sample I'm working through from Merit Beauty. I'm just loving this mascara. I think it's definitely glamorous enough for a retro green look. For lipstick, I'm going to use the sample of a Sisley product. It's their Phyto Lip Twist in the color 15. It's a pretty coral color. I found this particular lipstick goes really well with these green lips. What? The formula is hydrating and quite emollient, and I find that it gives a bit of an effortless look, but there's just enough of this orange kind of coral pigment to stand out and provide some contrast with the green. I find that a little more flattering than necessarily going directly for some of these pink tones. This is the completed eye look. I hope you enjoyed this review of Natasha Denona's Retro Glam palette. If you haven't already liked this video or subscribed to my channel, I invite you to do that right now. I would love to have you back here on my channel. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well out there, and I hope you have a great week ahead and a safe and happy New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Thank you so much for watching. Talk soon.